Back once again to apartment building wealth generation system, and we are about to start module number 3. We've wrapped up with module number 1, why apartment buildings, and then with number 2 we looked at what do I buy, purpose built versus non-purpose built, different sizes of buildings, the styles and features that you want to look at and avoid. In this particular module we're going to look at where do I buy? Do I buy close to home, far away? What type of neighborhoods do I look at? The economies, am I looking at the micro or the macro economic conditions in the market, as well as building your team. We'll then move on to how do I buy in the 4 steps in module number 4, analyzing a real deal in module 5, making the offer the conventional way versus my way in module number 6, and finally in module number 7, now that you own it, what do you do with it? You got the transition year and the property management. All right, so let's quickly review the homework from module number 1. I left you with the homework of looking at a property called Pine in Ormond. It's a 21-unit apartment building, and the age of the building is 1964. It's a combination of wood frame, stucco, poured concrete, located in a very nice neighborhood, lower middle class. The original purchase price was just $225,000, but that was because it was in such bad disrepair. We invested $325,000 into the property. The average rents at that time was $675 per month, and the local GRM was 6. So I asked you to find out what the building value was, the forced equity, class of building, good deal, bad deal. Well, the building value based upon these numbers comes up to $1,020,600, which is a significant increase from what I actually purchased it for of $225,000. We have forced equity, meaning that after spending an additional $325,000 in material and labor into that building, not all labor, but there was a lot of sweat equity still in there, the value of that building increased by over $470,000. The class of this particular building would be considered a D class strictly because of its age and overall condition. However, it was a fantastic deal, generated good profit, good cash flow, so definitely not a bad deal. All right, so that was the homework from module number 2. Again, if you have any questions, you can't figure out why your numbers didn't match up, go back and watch the video, the online course again, to understand where you made your mistakes, to see if you can figure it out. And if in the end you can't figure it out, by all means send me an email and I'll walk you through the whole process. All right, so where do I buy? We're going to look at the options of close or far away, what area of the cities or town to look at. We're going to take a look at the economics and building your team. So what you need to know and do in order to buy a good deal regardless of its location. That's the key here. So when we're taking a look within 1 hour drive, that's close by. That's what I consider to be close by. Other people might consider 2 hours a close by, but I consider 1 hour drive to be close by. The pros of doing that is you're able to see and touch the property, which is always nice to see your investment and feel good about it. You have the opportunity to do hands-on management. You also have the opportunity to do hands-on maintenance should you wish to. Or if you have a management company in place, you have the ability to watch the management company more closely and manage the management company. The cons of having it so close, though, is that there's the potential for easy access to you from your tenant's perspective. So if they know where you live, the last thing you want to do is walk out your door one morning and find a tenant sitting there upset with you because repairs haven't been done, or they're there to complain about another tenant. You'd never want your tenants to know where you live. There's also the temptation to micromanage the management company. You have to, if you hire a good property management company, you have to allow them to do their job. You don't want to be looking over their shoulder, micromanage them all the time, because nobody likes that. At the same time, you do want to, keep an eye on them, make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. There's also the temptation then to self-manage it. So if you bought this property with the intent of being hands-off and you just can't help yourself and you get in there and you start managing it yourself or doing repairs yourself, there's a great temptation for that as well. Thinking that you're going to save a few bucks here and there. Yes, you might save a few bucks, put some money in your pocket, but what is your time actually worth? Time and aggravation. I know that, for example, I spent the better part of a day changing a toilet, which should have been a very simple 1 hour, 2 hour job at the very most. What I didn't realize and understand was because of the age of this particular building, the floor drain underneath the toilet had a different offset, meaning that it was too close to the wall for a conventional brand new toilet. So I can't just go to Home Depot, pick up a brand new toilet and put it on because of this offset. I had to order one. But I didn't discover this until after taking the old toilet out, taking it down 2 flights of stairs, putting it out in the yard, and started to install the new toilet. So it can be a very frustrating experience. When I called the plumber to say, you know what, I've got a toilet that needs to be replaced, he asked where it was. He said, oh, we need to order that toilet. So you can save yourself a lot of grief if you just let the professionals do it and you focus on what you do best. The other challenge when you're buying close to home is you have the temptation or the challenge that you might pay too much for the property simply because it is close to you and you pay for that privilege, and you might actually get a little bit too emotional about it as well because you can see it and touch it, and when that happens there is that potential to pay too much or overpay for a property. Now when you're looking far away, I consider far away to be more than an hour's drive or a 4-hour flight. It could be across the country, it could be in another country, whatever the case. The pros of doing it this way is that you open the door to a much larger selection of properties and affordability. So you can start looking in different markets. There's no connection to the tenants. It's completely hands-off. You look at it and consider it, treat it like it's a standalone business. Just like you're buying any other business, that's the way you treat this property. It's much more or less emotion and more business focused as well. The cons of doing it long distance like this, though, is that, again, you can't see or touch it, so you don't get that fuzzy, warm feeling. And what happens is you get out of sight, out of mind, so things can be slipping by that you wouldn't normally slip by if you could see it. You could potentially have management challenges. This is probably one of the biggest challenges with long distance ownership, is finding a good quality management company to manage the property. So you want to make sure that whatever market you're investing in, that there are several options for management companies, so you're not stuck with the only company in town. Also, the challenge of locating, finding, and managing trades to work on the site can be a challenge as well. You want to be involved in the annual inspection, which means that that's going to require you making a trip to the property. Now, if it's a 2 or 3 hour drive once or twice a year, that's not the end of the world, not a big deal. But if you have to fly across the country, you're now looking at a $600-700 airplane ticket plus car rental and accommodations. So you could easily be spending $1,500-2,000 just to do an annual inspection of your property. However, the benefits of buying it in a depreciated market can certainly offset the cost of doing your long distance inspection. You can see a picture down in the bottom right hand corner here of some cameras and technology. This is the beautiful thing about technology these days, is that you could actually pay for the internet service or get your own internet service in the utility room and connect your, you can put wireless cameras up, and you can actually sit at your computer on the other side of the country and click on a button, and you can watch what's going on in your property and see who's coming, who's going. You can record for security reasons. You can watch the tradespeople when they're doing work, etc. So there is ways that you can manage long distance as well. Now, when you're looking far away, you have to decide, well, what city or town should I actually look at? So it's really important for you to understand that approximately 40% of the population are renters. And in any given market, there's going to be a mix of rental properties versus homeowner-occupied properties. And what you want to learn and understand is what is the percentage of the rental properties compared to homeowner-occupied properties. Now, you can find this information here in Canada on Stats Canada or through CMHC. Outside of Canada, there's other government agencies that keep track of these things. So you go to these sites and you find how many homes are in a municipality, and how many rental properties are in that municipality, do a quick calculation to see what the percentage is. Now, if, for example, the municipality, town, community, whatever you're looking at, has only 20% of the properties are rental properties, yet you know that 40% of the people, approximately, are going to be potential renters. That means there is a significant shortage of rental properties. If you have a shortage of rental properties, that means that they're going to be in high demand. So supply and demand suggests that if you've got high demand, low supply, then the cost of the rent is going to go up considerably. If your rent is higher, your income is higher. If your income is higher, the value for the property is going to be much higher. Therefore, it's going to cost you more money to buy and invest in that particular market. Yes, you're getting better rents, but it costs you more money to buy there in the first place. Now, if you take a look at another municipality, and they've got 40% of the properties are rental properties. Again, 40% of the population are renters. It's what you call a balanced market. So there's just enough properties to satisfy the demand for the number of renters in that market. Therefore, you don't have a high demand for rental properties, and you're actually, as the landlord, you may be struggling to fill your units. You may have a higher vacancy than you like to have. And in order to attract tenants, you may get into a bit of a bidding war. You lower your rents so you can fill your place up. As a result, you've got lower rental income and higher vacancies. Therefore, your income overall is lower. Because you've got lower income, lower revenues, that decreases the value of the property. So to purchase properties in that market is going to be more affordable. They're lower prices. Yet, you have to deal with lower rents. The key here, though, is that you'll discover that, yes, the rents are lower, but they're not significantly lower. So, for example, let's say Town A, the average price of a rental property for a triplex is $300,000, and the average rent is $1,000 a month. In Town B, that same property, if you could pick it up and move it over to Town B, is only worth $200,000 or $225,000, but the rents are $800 a month. So you've gone down 30% in value of the building, but you've gone down only 20% in the income. So you're going to be more profitable in Town B. These are the types of things you need to be aware of when you're looking at different markets to invest in. Another thing to be aware of and watch is what are the taxes in each of the municipality. So you think taxes are pretty much the same across all municipalities across the country, but the reality is each municipality has the right to set their own mill rate. The mill rate is a number combined by your province or state and your county and your municipality. They combine all of the services that are required, they come up with a mill rate. So for example, the residential mill rate in the city of Brockville is 0.013107424. You take that value, that number, and you multiply that against the assessed value of the property, and that will give you the taxes for the year. Now we used an example here of a $500,000 property, and we used the mill rate for the town of Smith Falls for a multifamily property, and the mill rate is 0.0339137. So that means our taxes are $16,700 almost. Now if you go up to Brockville, multifamily, if we could pick that property up, the same property multiplied by 500,000 times their mill rate, you'll see that it's approximately 1/3 less. That means the taxes in Brockville for the same property, same services, is going to be between $10,000 and $11,000. That's a $6,000 to $7,000 tax savings for you, the investor, that goes directly into your pocket, which goes to your bottom line, which increases your net operating income, which again increases the overall value of your property. So these are all things that you need to be aware of that can affect the value of your property. All right, so what are the outcomes? Why would you consider looking far away? Well, more and better deals are available to choose from. There's less emotions involved because you're looking strictly at the numbers, and you're forced to deal with it like it is a standalone business as well, and it's truly hands-off. It's very hard to pick up your toolkit and go over and change a set of taps in the afternoon just because of the inconvenience. When you're looking at neighborhoods, you want to learn which neighborhood to invest in and why. So you need to start off with, you need to be aware of the average tenant profile. And again, keep in mind this is the average tenant. So if you happen to be listening to the program and you yourself are a tenant, you don't fit this profile, don't get your nose out of joint. I'm just talking average, the typical tenant profile. There's definitely extremes on both sides. They tend to have a lower income. They work in the service industry jobs if they have a job at all. A lot of people, a lot of tenants in the lower income bracket are also on social assistance or disability, and there's nothing wrong with that. They experience high debt service ratios, so their GDS and TDS, remember we talked about that earlier on in the earlier lessons. What this means is they've got too much debt, bad debt. They don't understand how to manage their money. So you need to be aware of that. Students, there's a lot of markets that service schools, universities, colleges, etc. So there's a great resource here to get into for rental properties in and around colleges and student market. Young adults just starting out, they don't have high-paying jobs yet. They may be paying student debt. They don't have any savings to get started off with, and they're currently living paycheck to paycheck. So these are all the different features of your typical tenant. So these typical tenants need to have certain features and services that are appealing to them. For many of them, they don't have cars. They rely on the local transit system. So they need to be close to buses and subways. They need to be within walking distance of shopping centers, the local grocery stores, the beer stores, convenience stores, banks, and discount clothing stores like your Giant Taggers, etc. Because that's where these people tend to shop because that's what they can afford. They also need to be close to health clinics, schools, laundromats, banks, cash advance stores. It's a sad reality, but that is the reality. They also are entitled, and rightly so, to be entertained. So, and they like to go to bingos, bars, and movies. So again, if you can identify these features in your neighborhood, these are good things that tenants are going to like. So we know that most renters are in the low income and low middle income, and these people frequent locations such as your discount clothing stores, taverns, bars, fast food chains, laundromats, check cashing pawn shops. So this is a very fast and easy way to identify a potential rental market in areas that are unfamiliar to you. So what I mean here is that you go into, you're shopping for a property, but you're not familiar with the city or the town. Just quickly take a drive around. Identify, oh, here's a discount clothing store. Here's several taverns and bars in a row, and there's a bunch of fast food chains. The likelihood is that those stores, those service chains are going to be located in lower income neighborhoods because that's the clientele that they are servicing. They are not going to install a tavern or a McDonald's in a high-end neighborhood. You'll never see that there. So these types of stores and food chains, laundromats, service industries are located in lower income markets. Now, with economics, the goal here is to understand the difference between the national and local economics and what impact they may have when determining where it would be a good place to invest. So on the national economic level, you want to take a look at the overall performance of the economy. You want to take a look at our dollar versus the US dollar. You want to take a look at the exports. How are things trending? What are the different incentives and programs that are available for federal stimulus? For example, back in 2008, after a major downturn in the market, the federal government decided to put all kinds of money back into the economy to stimulate the economy by offering opportunities for people to build new buildings, new roads, bridges, etc. All of this new money being put into the economy stimulates the economy and creates more jobs. More jobs puts more money in people's pockets. More money in their pockets, people spend more money. So it's good for the economy overall. Free trade agreements, how can that affect the different markets that you're in as well? So we've recently entered into a new European agreement, which has taken effect, but takes effect more over a period of about 5 years. We're currently in the process of renegotiating the North American Free Trade Agreement. So you need to be aware of the potential impact on that. A big factor there, for example, is always the wood industry, the lumber industry. So if you are investing in an economy that relies heavily on timber and lumber mills, and all of a sudden there's all of these new tariffs and taxes being put on the exports, that could kill the industry in your market. So these are little things that you need to be aware of. On a more local economic level, you need to be aware of what incentive programs there are, how is the job growth, is there any new public transit system coming into play, what are the mill rates. And the best source for a lot of this information is at the local municipal office. What you need to do is contact the economic development officer, and depending on the size of the community, it could be a very small office or it could be a very large office with multiple people in that office. Their primary role is to market and promote their community, to attract new business and to have the community grow and generate more jobs and become more vibrant and just growing in general. So you want to understand what they have for incentive programs. So for example, years ago when I did a bit of a road tour and I was touring around some small cities in northern Ontario, and I stopped in this one particular market and I was talking to the economic development officer, and I discovered that the local, what they were doing is they were selling local plots of land in their industrial park for $1, an acre for $1. This is serviced with electricity and water to the edge of the property. And I said, well, why would you do that? And they said, well, what we want to do is we want to attract new businesses to come to our community, because these new businesses will create more jobs. More jobs creates more growth, more spending, more people buying properties. It's just good for the whole economy. So that was their plan, to get people coming back to their small community. So each community is going to have a unique plan. I mentioned earlier that I have one student, for example, that the community that he's investing in, they have a plan to help developers with redevelopment, beautification plan, for example, where they will provide some funding to help the developer pay for some renovations to the property to make the properties more attractive, which makes the whole downtown more attractive, which makes the whole community a better community to invest in. The economic development officer could also help direct you to finding the mill rates for the communities as well. The real estate is a very cyclical business. Just like the stock market, it goes up and down, but unlike the stock market, it's a much more gentle swing. So you don't have those severe peaks and valleys. You're not going to have a severe drop in the real estate market of 20% in 1 or 2 days. The 20% could take place over a period of 3, 6, or 12 months. And then it will bottom out, it may flatten for a while, and start to rebound back up. So this is the real estate cycle and how it works. There's many different reasons with a real estate cycle as to the peaks and valleys, how they actually happen. You could have a boom market where developers go in and they start building all kinds of homes to satisfy the demand for all these people moving in because of the boom market. Then the market levels off, people stop moving, but the developer has overbuilt, and now there's more supply than there is demand, so they have to start dropping the prices, and that can cause a slide down into a recession. or the economy itself could enter into a recession and people start losing their jobs. They're forced to sell their homes. They have to downsize into smaller homes. So there's many different reasons why you can get into a depression, a recession rather. This is another example of the S-curve in real estate, but it's based more on emotion, which I like to include this because people can connect to the emotions. So people love to invest in real estate when the cycle is going up. So you start off with optimism, excitement, and thrill. This is when you can't go wrong. You buy a property and it goes up by 10, 15, 20% over the course of the next year. And you think, man, am I ever a smart investor? Then you reach that point where the market starts to shift for whatever reason, and the market starts to slide, and you start to get a little bit anxious, and you go, oh, no, hang on, it's going to come back. I'm in here for the long term. Then you get into the denial, then the fear, and then desperation starts to set in, and panic, and then you start to, you know what, I've got to dump my properties, and you start to get rid of your properties before you hit the bottom. And then once you hit the bottom, things start to turn around. You see hope, relief, and optimism, and the cycle repeats. The challenge is many people panic and they get rid of their properties too soon. So I always like to ask people, when is the worst time when is the best time to buy? Well, the obvious best time to buy would be at the bottom of that real estate cycle, down between despondency and depression. The challenge is nobody knows when the bottom is until the market starts to rebound. So the actual best time to buy, based upon the real estate cycle, is when it starts to climb back up and you start to see hope and relief. That's the time when you want to get back in the market, if you've exited from the market at all. The challenge is you don't know when that is, and I always say the best time to buy is when the numbers make sense. So it doesn't matter if you're at the very top of the cycle where you're at euphoria. As long as the numbers make sense and the property cash flows, then it's okay to buy it. Because the strong cash flow will carry, it doesn't matter if the property value drops, you still have a rental property that's going to rent. And as long as you've got a tenant in there and you keep the place rented, it'll keep paying for itself, and you know the cycle is going to come back up. Then I follow that up with, when is the worst time to sell? Now, most people think that the worst time to sell is down around the desperation, panic, despondency period. And based on the S-curve, absolutely, that's the worst time to sell. But the worst time to sell could also be at the top of euphoria, when you've reached the absolute maximum value for that property. And the reason I say that is that the worst time to sell is when you have to sell. Because when you have to sell, you put yourself in a situation where perhaps you might be under financial distress because of a marital breakup, or another business that you own is experiencing financial woes and you're going into bankruptcy. So when you have to sell a property, that's the absolute worst time, because you don't have options. So knowing what to look for and how to discover it will now help identify preferred markets to invest in. So for example, Ottawa is a very stable market. It has very low appreciation, but very, very stable. In Edmonton, the market fluctuates with the oil prices. When the oil prices are going up, you've got very good trends going up. Recently, the oil industry has declined. Prices dropped a little bit in Edmonton, and just this year, the market has flattened out and has started to climb back up. One thing that Edmonton has done, though, to help eliminate or soften those ebbs and valleys, is they've diversified. They've become more than a one-horse town. It's a very large city which relies heavily on the oil industry. However, they've also expanded their transportation hub. They are a major transportation hub for products moving north and south, east and west, and their airport has expanded dramatically, causing and creating plenty of jobs and lots more stimulation there. Calgary is very similar to Edmonton. It was very much tied to the oil industry as well, but they've also become a little bit wise over the years and started to diversify. So you need to be aware of the market you're investing in. Is it a one-horse town? If I invest here in the good times, what's going to happen when things turn bad? Also, during that time that the markets were going up 15, 20, 25%, a lot of people were getting in the market and making all kinds of money based upon appreciation, doing nothing but buying a property, sitting on it, and selling it a year later. In my opinion, yes, that's real estate investing, but it's not truly investing. It's real estate speculation. It's no different than putting your money in the stock market, hoping that the value of the market will go up. If it doesn't go up, you're going to lose money. And that's exactly what happened for a lot of people who were playing that game. They allowed the greed to take over, and they kept saying, well, I'll do one more deal. I'll do one more deal. And then all of a sudden, the market crashed. They weren't able to sell the property. They had to hang on to their properties. I know a couple people who had significant sized portfolios that were all over leveraged because they paid too much, hoping that the values would continue to go up, and then they couldn't afford to carry the properties anymore. And after 3 or 4 years, a couple of these people ended up going bankrupt and losing all of the gains that they were able to experience. For myself personally, I am of the mindset, slow and steady, cash flow first, always make sure the property cash flows. Did I miss out on some appreciation? Absolutely. However, I'm still here and going strong. Now, with respect to the team, your objective here is to explain who you must have on your team to help ensure your success as an investor and why, especially when buying from far away. So we're going to take a look at realtors, lawyers, accountants, building inspectors, property managers, and lenders. So first of all, let's talk about a realtor. Now, for the record, I am a licensed real estate broker. I have been for a number of years. So I'm speaking from a place of experience when I'm talking about real estate agents, and I'm not intending to slam realtors by any stretch of the imagination. However, the reality is that most real estate agents are not educated enough to deal with investors and investing real estate. So let's first of all take a look at how real estate agents are actually paid. This is important for you to understand so you know where the motivation is. The commission structure between an agent and a broker can be a variety of different splits. It can be 60-40, 70-30, 80-20, 90-10, 100, or a combination of those. If an agent makes no sale, then the agent does not get paid. It is strictly 100% commission-based. You should never mislead your agent. You want to compensate them fairly because these people work hard. The good ones work extremely hard for you. The commission paid is always paid by the seller, and it is negotiable. Now, there is a trend where, and there is the possibility that a buyer can also pay or share the cost of the real estate agents as well. Or you can pay, if there's no agent involved from the seller's perspective, but you want an agent to represent you, then you can hire an agent to represent your interest in a transaction and you pay the agent. Now, typically, first of all, the commission rate is negotiable, but the commission is going to be dictated by the size of the property, location, the complexity of the deal. There's a lot of different factors in place. So where I live, the average commission that people are charged for residential properties is 5%, a straight 5%. It could be as low as 4%, it could be as high as 8% for the rural remote properties as well. In provinces out in Western Canada, for example, they have what they call a 7-3%, meaning that they charge 7% on the first 100,000 value of the property, 3% on the balance. Now, when the seller pays 100% of the commission, no matter what the percentage is that they pay 100% of that commission, they pay that to the listing brokerage. That's the company that has their property for sale. The listing brokerage then divides that commission, usually 50-50, between the listing brokerage and the selling brokerage. Each brokerage will then share that commission with the agent that's involved. So on the listing side, the listing agent could be on a split anywhere between 70 and 100%. Same thing on the selling side. The difference here is that the listing agent has a lot more expenses associated with this particular property because they have to market the property, advertise it, spend a lot more time with that property. So they're going to spend 20 to 50% of their earnings on expenses related to that property, plus the listing expenses as well. With respect to the selling agent, their expenses are going to be considerably lower. They have to worry about marketing for themselves, they have to worry about their licensing and their operating, but because they don't have the listing expenses, they're a little bit further ahead, so they make more money. When the listing brokerage, when we double end it, so that means that the same agent represents the listing and the selling side of the agreement. So we have the listing brokerage pays 50% to the listing brokerage, 50% to the selling brokerage, but in this case they are the same. So that means the agent's going to get, depending on their split, 70 to 100% of that brokerage. So that means that quite simply, they're going to make more money. So most agents are very motivated and excited when they can double end a real estate deal. The challenge here is that there's what we call dual agency. And you need to understand who the agent is actually working for, especially when they're representing both the seller and the buyer in an agreement or in a transaction. So the buyer brokerage needs a commitment contract with the brokerage. It's not legally required. What that means is, excuse me, if you come to me and I'm the realtor and you ask me to represent you and look for properties, I may ask of you to sign a buyer brokerage agreement. This means that you agree to work with me, and if you find a property, then you have to buy that property through me. If I find a property that meets your criteria, then you'll buy that property through me, but you are committed to me. I understand the purpose and the intent of it because a lot of buyers will show no commitment to the agent, and the agent could spend months and sometimes years working with a buyer, and then the buyer turns around and uses another agent. They go to an open house and they buy the house through the agent that's at the open house, and I've just spent months or years of my time and money representing you, all for nothing because I get nothing. Now, when the agent works for both parties, who is that agent actually representing? Are they representing the seller or are they representing the buyer? Well, what's supposed to happen is they are supposed to remove themselves from the negotiations and just become a facilitator and not provide advice to either party. What they do is they provide the facts and the details and they facilitate the transaction, and they allow the buyer and the seller to negotiate through you. You are not supposed to share any personal information. So for example, if the seller says, I'm prepared to go as low as $250,000, then you are not allowed to share that with the potential buyer, because why would the buyer offer more? However, unfortunately, many agents don't have the morals and values. They just look at the bottom line, their bottom line, they want to close the deal. So they'll turn around and tell the potential buyer, I think you can get this for $250,000. Let's put an offer in there. So that's not serving the best interest of the seller. That's serving the best interest of you, the real estate agent. So you need to be aware of that. In a perfect world, it's always better to have the agent representing you and your interests. So you have an agent representing you as the buyer, the seller has an agent representing them as the seller. As you can see by this cartoon here though, that can still become a conflict if both of the agents work out of the same office, because they can potentially talk to each other as well. So you can see and understand the challenges when you're working with a real estate agent. So my recommendations for you is, first of all, have your own agent represent you. Secondly, never disclose, unless you truly trust the individual and you've got a great relationship, never disclose what you're prepared, the maximum you're prepared to pay. Keep your cards close to your chest, like in the game of poker. You don't disclose your hand to anybody, including the realtor that's working with you. That way, you have no fear of information being disclosed that you do not want disclosed. There's also different types of investors, or realtors out there, rather. You have commercial realtors and residential realtors. Now, if you're buying a triplex, sixplex, even up to a 12-unit building, you could still be using a residential agent. You could also be working with a residential agent who's representing the seller. The challenge with the residential agent working with commercial properties is they have much less knowledge and understanding about how that industry actually works. With respect to a commercial agent, they have taken many more courses. They're much better educated with respect to investing. The challenge there, though, is that they're paper smart. They're not hands-on smart. So many of these individuals have never gone out and owned commercial properties themselves. So there's one thing to learn it on paper and read books and apply that, and it's another thing to actually be in the field and applying it in real life. You also have agents who are investors or non-investors. I would suggest that you use an agent who is an active investor themselves. You stand a better chance of them understanding the nuances of investing in real estate. You then have experienced agents and newbies. I'm sort of on the fence here because I like a newbie because I have enough, as an investor, I have enough background, knowledge, and confidence to understand what it is I want, and I'm just using the realtor to facilitate a transaction and do some research for me. Therefore, a newbie will do the job nicely. If I am an inexperienced investor, I would lean towards the experienced realtor and rely on their knowledge. You definitely want to stay away from friends. It's nice to be able to give business to your buddy, but your buddy may have your best interest at heart, but they may not be the best realtor for you at that time. So you always want to make sure that you are working with the best realtor to do the best job for you. Then if you get involved in a private deal, there's no commission involved. What I would suggest you do is still hire a realtor to represent your interest to help you through the process. The seller may not agree and may not want a real estate agent involved from their perspective, but you can still have one involved on your side of the transaction. It just means that you're going to have to pay a commission to them. Now, here's where people think, well, it's only going to take them an hour or two of their time, so I'll pay them a couple $100. Well, there's more to it than just time. There's a lot of liability involved as well. So if I was to do a flat fee for somebody to write up an offer for, say, a single-family residential house, I would not do that for less than $1,000. I have to pay insurance, which is very expensive on an annual basis to protect me from liability, errors and omissions, and this risk that I'm taking on, I need to be rewarded for it through a commission. My time is money. So respect your agents and pay them accordingly. Now, with respect to a lawyer, again, not all lawyers are the same. You've got real estate lawyers, family lawyers, tax lawyers, criminal lawyers, etc. You want to focus primarily with a real estate lawyer. Now, in most small communities, or you've got the family lawyer, they do a mix of real estate and family. They're sort of a jack of all trades. That's okay for the smaller deals. However, when you get into larger deals, you need a lawyer that truly understands the nuances of the leases, especially commercial leases and the contracts. You also need a lawyer who understands the landlord and tenant tribunals, the rules and regulations that are there. So there are lawyers that actually focus all of their attention. They become specialty with tenants and investors. They tend to be a little bit more expensive because they are specialized. So deal with a firm that has a group of lawyers is your best bet. So for example, my lawyer is a young lawyer. I like a young lawyer because I can sort of train him, mold him to do what I want. He's much more open to new ideas, new concepts. whereas an older lawyer who's been around the block for 30, 40 years is very set in their ways, and they don't like risk, they don't like change. So I like the young lawyer. I also like the fact that the young lawyer can draw upon a more senior group within his firm. And when it comes time to write joint venture agreements, then he can call in somebody who's got expertise in that. When I want to create a new corporation, he can call in a different lawyer for that. If I've got tax code questions, they can call in a different lawyer for that. So different lawyers for different reasons. You want to make sure that your lawyer is trained to avoid, not risk averse, but again, this is why I like my young lawyer, because he's a little bit more open to new ideas and creative ideas. So vendor takebacks, RSP mortgages, not all lawyers are open to RSP mortgages or even second or third mortgages, or some creative clauses like a cashback clause in the agreement. So I like a younger lawyer because they're more open-minded. You have to keep in mind, though, that lawyers are risk adverse. They're trained to be risk adverse. So their automatic response is to say no to a lot of creative ideas. So you need to be able to get a lawyer that you can work with and is willing to think outside the box and take some calculated risks. You also want a lawyer that is willing to say, I don't know how to do that. And I have that lawyer in my case. If I present a challenge, he'll quickly say, you know what, I've never experienced this, but let's ask somebody else. With respect to an accountant on your team, again, not all accountants are the same. You want one who is preferably experienced with real estate, either representing a lot of other investors successfully. Preferably, you'd like an active investor or an accountant who's an active investor, because they're going to look at their investments through the eyes of an accountant, and they're going to be able to share their insight with you then. You want an accountant who will see challenges and create a plan with you and help you identify these challenges and work through the plan. You want an accountant who's open to new ideas and concepts as well, not afraid to challenge the government. Again, like the lawyers, accountants are extremely risk adverse. They do not like doing anything that could potentially be challenged by the government and cause them a lot of grief. You also want them, the accountant, to provide you with a list of good, affordable bookkeepers so that you can hire a bookkeeper to do your day-to-day transactions, week-to-week transactions. They come in either on a weekly or monthly basis. Keep your books up to date. So at the end of the year, you're able to set your books down in front of the accountant. And because the accountant and the bookkeeper talk to each other, they're on the same page, it's less time spent by your accountant trying to figure out what's going on. That mentioned, so I mentioned bookkeeper previously. Extremely important to have a good bookkeeper, whether you do it yourself or you have somebody else do it. Make sure you understand what your accountant needs at the end of the year so that you can structure it properly. You want them to be affordable. You don't want to overpay, but you don't want to pay the cheapest either. You want the best. You want a really good bookkeeper. Reliable, timely, understands your business, and loves their job. With respect to a building inspector, there's different building inspectors for different types of buildings. So for example, if you're buying a single family house, a home inspector can do, most home inspectors, that's what their primary focus is. If you ask your home inspector who does single family homes to do an apartment building, they may say, no, I'm not qualified to do that. You need different qualifications for that. Well, what about a triplex? Well, I can do a triplex. So there are limitations as to what your home inspector can actually inspect. When you get into the larger buildings, you may need the services of an actual engineer, especially if you have parking garages, balconies, higher risk items like that, elevators, anything of that nature. You want the inspector to belong to a reputable association. It's always best to look for references, and the best place to get references if you're doing investing is to go to the local investment groups. So here in Ottawa, we have a group called OREO. That's your Ottawa Real Estate Investment Organization. They have 250 members in the group, and there's several home inspectors that attend that on a regular basis, and they work with a lot of the people there. So you can ask the other investors, how did you like that person as an inspector? You also want a team. You don't want to rely just solely on your home inspector to check out the roof and the HVAC system. So quite often I will also arrange during my home inspection, I'll arrange for the furnace to be inspected by the local furnace company as well. Or I'll ask the roofer to come over and check out the roof for me and give me a quote for a new roof. These are all things that are part of your inspection. They become part of your team. I've actually included for you an example of a home inspection report that was done by a company called Cabin to Castle outside of Edmonton, in Edmonton. So your team, your success formula, 50% is finding the deal, 50% managing the deal. So that brings us to property management, the services, the experience, the fees, the monthly fees, the fill rates, and the markup rate, etc. So there's 3 P's involved in property management. Managing the expenses effectively, the processes to make sure they run smoothly and professionally, and the people to attract and keep good quality tenants. So that is your team, which consists of your inspectors, your proactive maintenance, managing the workers, managing the numbers, fees, rates, maintenance, maintaining controls as well. The processes, understanding the collection of non-payment of rent. Have a process in place so that when a tenant doesn't pay their rent, how do you get it from them? What do you have to do? You start the eviction process immediately, the notice to vacate. You have your annual maintenance inspections, smoke detector agreements. If you are an active investor right now and you don't have smoke detector agreements in place, get one in place today. Shut the program down right now. Go get yourself a smoke detector agreement and get your tenants to sign it. This is critical because if there is a fire in the building and the smoke detector has been dismantled and you do not have a smoke detector agreement saying that it was in good working order and it was signed by the tenant, then you could be liable for any damages and or criminally responsible for any deaths if there were any deaths involved as well. What happens when you have complaints? What's the process for that? Property management and people go hand in hand. You have to keep in mind that tenants are your customers. They are your bread and butter. They are the people who are paying the mortgage that's paid, paying down the mortgage on that property. They're buying you that property. So treat them fairly, with respect, and consistently. Treat it like a business relationship. Never actually become friends with your tenants. And do not, for heaven's sakes, rent to your family and friends. Understand and appreciate their situation and attempt to always make it a win-win. So be empathetic, but don't be sympathetic. So what I mean by that is understand their situation, but don't give in. When they say, I'm going to be late for rent this week, it won't be here for a week. That's fine, I understand. But I'm okay and I'll accept your rent in a week. In the meantime, I still have to issue an N4, which is an eviction based upon non-payment of rent. When you pay me the rent, this eviction will get ripped up, not an issue. You relate to them at their level. Don't talk down to them. Understand your rights as a landlord versus the rights of a tenant. Be willing to compromise. Be compassionate. The next person is your lender. Now this could be your local bank, it could be a mortgage broker, or it could be private money as well. So when we're talking about a bank, when you go to a bank to borrow money, you're looking at one source of funds. You're looking at their very strict set of guidelines, and they can change their policies frequently. The challenge is if you don't fit into their mold, their pigeonhole, then you won't qualify for funding from that particular bank. When you go to a broker, they have multiple sources of lenders that they can go to. They can go to all the banks, they can go to a lot of different insurance companies. There's all kinds of different sources of lenders out there that they can go to. What they will do is they will assess your application, and based upon your application, based upon the property you're buying, based upon your credit score, based upon your earning potential, they will decide which lender they're going to apply to. Then they'll send it out to 3 or 4 different lenders and see what the response is. The nice thing here is that when they they're going to pull your credit report, and they're going to send that credit report with your application to all these different potential lenders. When you go to the bank with only one source, they're going to pull your credit report. Every time your credit report is pulled, that has a negative impact on your score. So you go to the bank, they turn you down. You go to Bank B, and they pull your credit report again, and they turn you down. Now you go to Bank C. Bank C goes to pull your credit report, and they see that Bank A and Bank B has pulled your credit already. So this causes a red flag, and they're going to say, well, why did you get turned down with Bank A and Bank B? So now it's going to become more of a challenge for you to qualify with Bank C. Whereas when you go to the mortgage broker, the broker is going to pull your credit report once. The other lenders are not going to see the impact of going to different lenders. They don't even know that you're shopping it around to different lenders now. So now you're able to get people bidding on your business. So this is a much better way to look for money. They will also help you and coach and guide you through the lending process. There's also the opportunity to use private money, and this means going to an individual. It could be a family friend or a business associate, and you can borrow money directly from them, or you can go back to your broker. And a lot of brokers, the more experienced brokers, will have sources of private money. In other words, they'll have some lenders who say, I've got a couple $100,000 I'd like to lend out. If you've got a good mortgage to put that into, I'd be open to doing that. When you do it through a broker, it usually costs you a bit more because the broker is going to charge 2 or 3 points above the bank rates for this service. So if the going rates right now were 5% for the same amount of money, then the broker is going to charge you 2 or 3%, and the private money guy might be saying, you know what, I want 6 or 7%. So in the end, it could end up costing you 8, 9, 10% for that private money. That's one option. What I like to do is I've actually bypassed the banks, the brokers, and the private, and I've gone directly to a lender. And this is the largest lender of insured funds in Canada. And I've got a relationship with a gentleman there by the name of Daryl. So whenever I have an opportunity to invest, I will actually run it past Daryl and say, here's what I'm looking at. What are you prepared to lend? Now, the rates, about 6, 7 years ago, when I bought a mortgage, I was able to get a mortgage at 3.55% or 4.25% for 10 years, which was an extremely excellent rate. The rates have since gone down to below 2%, and they've started to come back up. So currently today, the rates, I could probably get a 5-year rate for about 2.75, 2.8%. On a 10-year term, I could get a rate around 3.5%. So very, very good rates. If you are looking at bigger deals, I'm more than happy to share my contact with you with Daryl. All right, so we looked at the realtor. We understand the contracts, clauses, and how they specialize in the industry. You want a good negotiator and a strategist. A lawyer, you need one that identifies potential risks, make sure you get what you agreed to, and that contracts are fulfilled as agreed upon. Your accountant needs to ensure your tax filings are accurate and that you are paying the least amount of taxes legally possible, identifying inefficiencies within your business, and help you understand how to correct those. You want to have a good bookkeeper to keep you organized and on top of the numbers, a building inspector to help you identify any potential issues when you're actually buying a property. A property manager is critical to your success because once you own that property, it's very important for you to maintain that property and actually improve the quality of that property, and this can be done with a good property manager. Lenders, always having access to money is critical for your success, So you always want to be looking for sources of money so that when an opportunity presents itself, you're able to act quickly. All right, so buy where the deals make sense. You find the deal based upon the financials, not the emotion. You justify the market conditions. You ask yourself, is this a bubble? Is it trending up? Or is it trending down? Or is it stable? What is the rental home ownership ratio? And what are the taxes in this particular market? Then you focus on building a very strong team, because if you don't have a strong team, there's no deal. It doesn't matter how good the deal is. If you don't have a strong team to support you in that market, that good deal can turn to a bad deal and go south on you very, very quickly. Once you've got all that in place, you simply pull the trigger. All right, so homework for module number 3 is to review the attached building inspection, just to become familiar with it. There's also a document called Dogs and Stars. Start researching potential investment properties and applying this Dogs and Star document to those properties to help you quickly assess whether it's a good deal or a bad deal. That's it. Thank you very much, and we will see you in the next module. Take care now.